be. Just let her be. He crazy. Merry meets, my fellow bookish witches. Welcome to the final vlog of Battle of the BookTubers, the penultimate video to the end of round 3. Obligatory competition recap. I and 3 other booktubers are competing in the 3rd round of a competition hosted by the lovely Danny over at Danny Dabbles. We are tasked with recommending 2 books to one another, and the booktuber who is the best at recommending books wins and gets to move on to the championship round. Please make sure to go check out my fellow competitors' videos to see how things are faring for them. I'll link each of their channels below. Give them a like and a subscribe while you're there. For this final vlog, I will be reading the books recommended to me by BookTuber I. Her book recommendations are The House Switch by Delemhach, then Slewfoot by BROM. I purposely set this up to have these 2 recommendations be the last ones I read for this competition, because I think these are both going to get high ratings from me. At least that is what I hope. I'm actually going to read the 2nd recommendation first this time around, which means I am going to start by reading Slewfoot, mainly because I'm in the mood for some darkness. The synopsis is screaming dark witchiness, but also because the book only comes in at just over 300 pages, while The House Switch is a whopping 600 plus pages. I'm saving that thick girl for last. Slewfoot takes place in 1666. We are talking Puritan settlement, headstrong women being accused of witchcraft, and a dark entity that has been dormant in the woods who has awoken. I had not heard of this book prior to it being recommended to me, but I have heard of the author, BROM. I have had his book, The Child Thief, on my TBR for years, and I think if I enjoy this one, I'm actually finally going to have to pick that one up. I'm really excited to get into this, and I cannot wait to see what happens in my first update. I'll see you there. I am just at 50% through Slewfoot. I am enjoying this. The story takes place in 1666 in New England, Puritan colony. I knew from the description that we were going to be dealing with a woman main character, that she was going to be accused of witchcraft. So already I was on edge about where this was taking place, when this was taking place. The description also talks about a dark entity that lives in the woods. The main character, Abita, lives on her farm, a ways away from the village, so she's isolated. She lives with her husband, Edward. Their farm is on the edge of this woods. In the beginning, we get chapters following Edward and Abita dealing with Edward's brother, trying to essentially take their farm out from under them. His name is Wallace. He is the most insufferable man. Oh my god, this man makes me so angry. We jump to the POV of these forest spirits. They are trying to wake this dark entity up to destroy the village nearby. One day, Abita loses her goat. The goat wanders off and ends up in the cave where this dark entity has been sleeping. There is this deep pit, and the goat falls in the pit, and this is the first creature that the slayer ends up consuming. It gives him energy. The other woodland spirits want to continue giving him blood. This need for revenge, for bloodlust, is what will bring him back to his full form. Abita goes and gets her husband Edward. She also tells him, I am sensing a dark entity, I'm sensing something bad. Even though Abita grew up with a pagan mother who has taught her to have this affinity for nature, she does believe in God and she has these values, pure qualities, which makes her a good person. She is willing to stand up for herself and be a strong voice for herself. Not Not so great in this time period, as made seen with her interactions with Wallace. Wallace is very much giving toxic masculinity in these interactions, which is very frustrating. Abatha brings Edward to the cave. He doesn't heed her warning, and he ends up slipping and falling into the pit. The fall itself is what kills him. The Slayer consumes him as well. After consuming Edward, he is able to then leave the cave. Abatha is freaking out. Months have gone by. They've had a funeral, and now Wallace is demanding that she leave the farm. The laws of their village, she is able to convince the ministers, let me try and work the farm. Let me try to pay off this one last payment for this farm. The problem with that Wallace has with this, aside from the fact that she is a woman and is trying to do a man's job, God forbid, is that he owes a debt, and he promised that farmland, which technically he owned, but he promised to Edward first as long as he made payment. Wallace was hoping to use that farm to pay off his debts. He is a sleazeball. Luckily, the ministers agree with Abatha, and they're like, cool, you can try to pay off this last payment, and if you do that, it is settled and you get to keep your farm. I found this completely refreshing. Usually in these stories, you have these church officials who are so anti-women, going after women, accusing them of witchcraft. Abatha proves that, hey, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm doing what my husband bid me to do. This is what we agreed to do, and I'm going to see it through. I like that the ministers, especially the head minister, is very much on her side. These are the laws. You have every right to do that. It was refreshing, because in a lot of books and a lot of media, when it comes to this time frame, you don't see that a lot. In addition to the ministers being on her side, the main minister, I believe it's Minister Carter, his wife is really good friends with her and sticks up for her, where a lot of the other women in the village are, let's be real, they're jealous and they're very catty. She's only been there for 2 years and she still feels like an outcast. They still treat her like an outcast. I guess the minister is because there is a part in the story where he is giving her time to miss church so that she could take care of the farm, and that's pissing a lot of people off. A lot of people are pissed off with her. It was just so refreshing that she had allies. That usually doesn't happen. You usually don't see that, and I am really liking that aspect of the story. The months passing in the story is a bit intense. I'm still getting used to it. I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of that aspect of the formatting of the story. While Abatha is handling her farm is when she meets the Slayer. Throughout all of this, he's unalived a couple villagers, both intentionally and unintentionally. What we've come to learn is that he cannot remember who he was prior to his slumber. The woodland creatures are telling him, you are the Slayer, you are meant to cause bloodshed, you are meant to drive away the humans. But he keeps having flashes of memory that is telling him that humans worshipped him, and in a way he loved the humans that worshipped him. He is pretty much convinced that there are pieces missing that he doesn't know and that the woodland creatures aren't telling him. It's wild to me that he's not forcing them to explain themselves, and they never do, or at least they haven't at this point. Of the woodland creatures, there's Forest, Creek, and Sky. Creek and Sky, they're not as pushy about the whole situation. Forest is a little brat. I cannot stand him. He is pissy because Slayer has revealed himself to Abatha, and they have made a friendship, made an agreement where she offers tribute to him. He, with his powers from that tribute, has helped her take care of her farm. So they're helping each other. Every time he receives a blessing or an offering from her, he kind of remembers things from his past. What I found really cute too was that Abatha gives him a name. She doesn't want to call him the Slayer, so she gives him the name Samson, which is the goat that fell into the cave. Now you might be thinking, well, doesn't she know what happened to her husband? She does, but she doesn't blame him because Edward falling into the pit was not Samson's fault. It was Forrest's fault. She's mad at him, so she doesn't allow him really near her. She's forgiven Samson for that because he didn't realize what he was doing. He was just told to eat. She is harvesting her farm. She's going to be able to make her payment. While she's been doing all of this, Wallace has been scheming. He has tried legally to still get the farm out from under her. Has not worked. No one is on his side. And I love that the more he doubles down on this, the more the people in the town are just like, he crazy. So often it would be the opposite, right? Because the legal routes have not worked for him. He has hired some muscle men to help him ruin Abita's plans. From the sounds of it, he just wants them to go steal her harvest, which is what she was going to use to pay him off. He's going to claim it's his, I'm assuming. I don't know what the full plan is. All I know is that he wants them to steal the harvest at this point. Not the worst thing he could do, mind you. Still a horrible, horrible person. In addition to this, because Samson has been around and he has magic, and because Abita has her pagan upbringing, it's also opened up or unleashed a magic within her. She hasn't really done anything with it except for the minister's daughter had a case of the measles, and so she quickly, with Samson's help, made an ointment to cure it for them. And she did that because, I mean, quite honestly, the minister and his wife are the only two that have really stuck up for her and have helped her. I like that even though the minister and his wife are hesitant to let her help, they can be coy. They can play coy that they don't know what she did, that it's essentially witchcraft in their eyes, but they know. They're just choosing to ignore that side of it. They are very grateful because it ends up saving their daughter. We are happy that you helped us. We are very appreciative of this. We won't say anything, but you need to be careful. You can't do this for just anybody. That could cause problems in the village. It's not even about, hey, you're a witch and you're doing weird stuff. It's, we know you are pious. We know you are pure. We know you're a good person and that you did this to help us. What you're doing isn't evil. We don't view this as evil. However, not everyone's going to feel that way because you are doing something that would introduce temptation for other people. I like this interpretation of religion. I like this interpretation of Christianity. It gives such a, I think, a better view of it, quite honestly. I'm excited to continue this. I'm curious where this is going. I really hope Samson takes out Wallace because, oh my God, that man, he needs to go. I am so annoyed with him. But I'm really curious what the next 50% of this book is going to be about. I'm wondering if Wallace's plan is going to fail and then he is going to resort to accusing her of witchcraft. I feel like that's almost where it's going to go at this point because, quite honestly, like, Samson's protecting her farm. I cannot imagine the musclemen he hired are going to be able to get past Samson, this dark entity that is half man, half goat that looks terrifying. I do not think that they're going to get past him to hurt her harvest or steal her harvest. I think that is going to be ultimately his plan, is that he's going to accuse her of witchcraft, turn the village against her. I'm worried something's going to happen to the minister. I really hope nothing bad happens to him. But God, this could go so many ways and I'm so curious. I'm really enjoying this. I'm not too surprised. I thought I was going to like this, especially as a pagan myself, as a witch. It's just a refreshing take. There is a reason that I have not consumed books or any type of media that is witch trial themed since high school. And you might be thinking it's because I do not like stories that involve that theme or that I'm triggered by them. I'm not. It's because they bring out such a rage in me as a woman, as a witch. I feel like not knowing if the book is going to have a satisfying resolution is a risk. And a lot of times it's a risk I do not want to take. We are still talking about Slewfoot. Where we left off was that Abitha is living on her late husband's farm. His older brother is trying to take it out from under her, doing her damnedest to live up to her late husband's wishes and also be her own person, be an independent woman outside of this Puritan village. She just wants peace. She just wants to live her life. In living that life, if she makes little trinkets, little charms that bring happiness to the villagers, brings happiness to her soul, let her be. Just let her be. We can't have nice things because of men like Wallace Williams, who is determined to get his farm back. He will straight up ruin her life to do it. He decides to switch things up. If she does not pay off her debt, she will then have to be indentured to him. Wallace is the worst. I wanted to wring his neck through the pages. He helps her bring back her corn, to the point where she has more than enough to pay off her debt. Wallace is spying on her. He sees the corn growing and he's just like, oh no, this can't be happening. His response to this is to try and steal the corn so she doesn't have it to give to him. He enlists the help of a couple of Native Americans. Right off the bat, I'm like, I don't trust where this is going. Why is he specifically asking for help from these men? Wallace arrives with his son and they are both disguised as Native Americans. He does not believe that they are going to succeed without being caught or seen. And if they are caught or seen, the Native Americans will be blamed. They have these wagons, but there is way too much corn, way more corn than Wallace anticipated. He is panicking. He starts loading the wagon more. The one guy is just like, no, don't do that. We're not going to be able to pull this out of here. Wallace isn't listening and he ends up breaking the wagon. In like a panic, he just decides to burn down the barn. It's at this point that Abatha obviously catches them because they're not really being quiet. She immediately recognizes Wallace and takes out her musket and shoots him. And I was so happy. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, because even if he claims he wasn't involved, it's like, well, how did you get shot? But of course, he's the man and he can talk his way out, which is what happens. Slewfoot does come during that attack. He ends up killing one of the Native Americans because he ends up attacking him. They call him a name, and I believe in the name in the book, it was Habamuk. This is based off of lore. However, the book misspells it. They misspell a couple of terms that are part of Native American lore. I'm wondering if that was intentional to not take away from that culture or try to appropriate it in some way. Used similar enough words without outright taking it. I don't know if that's better. I don't know. I don't know the reasoning for that. Samson, because of this encounter, has started to get cloudy again. He feels like there might be answers at the encampment for the Native Americans. This is where he encounters the shaman. This is what the wild folk had been warning him about. They weren't giving him clear answers to his questions about who he was. They didn't want him facing the shaman because they didn't believe he was strong enough. But he goes and faces the shaman. He gets trapped back into slumber. Now, while all this is happening, Wallace comes to the farm to collect payment. Days prior to this, she takes all the honey that she has made from her beehives and is able to sell it for like way above market value. She has a bunch of money. She has a bunch of excess honeycomb. It's paid. Like, I can pay my debt with this. Wallace has the most toddler temper tantrum with this news, claiming that the deal was in corn and that if she can't pay in corn, then it's no good. Luckily, the ministers are there and are like, dude, Wallace, she has the money. She's paying you way more than what the deal was. What is wrong with you? He can accept this and it's a decent amount for what Abatha is paying, but it's not enough to get him out of debt. It's in this moment, he immediately jumps to, oh, you are clearly a witch. It's witchcraft, blah, blah, blah. What I like about this scene is that we're getting a lot of internal monologue from Wallace about how he was so certain that all the ministers were going to see how crazy Abatha was. Then now they're seeing him as the crazy one and he's like, no, this is wrong. This can't be. What? He brings back witnesses. They witness Abatha making little trinkets, little charms. It's enough to accuse her of witchcraft and they bring her back to the village. The magistrate comes from Hartford, which is like the bigger village nearby. She gets put on trial. She is on her own. And it's very frustrating. One of the things they accuse her of is that she has a familiar, and it's because she has a pet cat. So here's the thing. My biggest trigger when it comes to any type of media is violence against children. That was a trigger I made very clear for this competition that I did not want to read. I would not be able to read it. There is another trigger that I have, but it's so obscure that I didn't feel the need to mention it. It's not as bad as the other trigger. That is specifically violence against cats. I am a cat owner. I am a cat lover. I just feel like in a lot of media, for some reason, people don't seem to care when cats are attacked, hurt, have any type of violence put on them. It's really frustrating for me. During this trial scene, they bring in her cat as evidence of it being a familiar because it was attacked by dogs, and one of the village people claims that they were absolutely certain that it was killed by the dogs, even though it wasn't. Abatha saved it, took care of it until it was healthy again. The second that happened, my gut sank because I knew that the cat was probably going to be unalived. It is very gruesome what they do to this cat. I had to put the book down and just reorient myself to deal with that. This is not BookTuber I's fault. I just didn't expect it to be a situation where I would encounter it. It is fine. I was able to get through it. It's awful. A sham of a trial. They do not hear her side. Wallace is enjoying it way too much. And this is where I say, in this moment, why I don't read witch trial type books, because it was so infuriating. The woman being ignored, her being talked over. No one wants to hear her side of things. No one wants to hear the truth. These men are whining and just attacking her verbally, and it was so frustrating. I think what made this doubly frustrating was that there were people who defended her and were on her side and believed her, and those people got shot down. And one of them was powerful. One of them was actually one of the ministers, which is crazy to me. He gets shot down. His wife gets shot down because she tries to protect her. And not only is his wife shot down, but because she is a woman, she is then accused of accessory to witchcraft. Which is so wild to me. Abita is sentenced to death. The minister's wife gets taken to this area outside the meeting house. Before they hang them, they are put into these cages, and the way it's described is that like they have to get in, curl in on themselves. They have to sit like that overnight. They are trying to get a confession out of the minister's wife so that she doesn't get hung along with Abita. She is adamant that she will not. First off, it's a lie. Secondly, she is a godly woman. She is a minister's wife. She would never admit to working with the devil. It would look bad for the magistrate if a minister's wife is hung. He is adamant to get her to confess. But eventually her daughter comes and is saying, father is beside himself, he's in the stocks, I can't lose both of my parents, please just confess. And so she does. She does it for her daughter. They take her away. Abita is not just hung, they tie up her ankles and they hang her upside down. It's going to be a long, painful experience for her. This whole time she's been calling to Samson for him to come back. Samson's dealing with the shaman. The wild folk decide to risk their lives. We're going to make a diversion, find Samson and wake him up and get him out. There is a showdown between Samson and the shaman, and Samson wins. Then the wild folk tell him Abita is in trouble. Samson arrives as she is hanging upside down, not doing great. He offers to her his blood. He slices his palm, tells her to drink the blood. If she does this, she won't be immortal, but she's going to live a very long time. She's going to basically be able to do everything he can magic-wise. She drinks his blood. Now we encounter this climactic ending. How this goes down. If you have read Carrie, the final scene of her walking through town, killing people, blowing things up, imagine that, but 1666 village, and it's a witch, because that is exactly what Abita does. It was very satisfying to read this entire scene. The first thing she does is she sets a stable on fire. She unalives a couple of the sheriff's people and the magistrate's people. Her main goal is that she wants to get to Wallace. There are some characters, like the sheriff of the town isn't a bad guy. These people she is leaving alone. But if you get in her way, it's brutal. She ends up at Wallace's house and they're eating dinner, which is so funny to me because they have like just no clue what's going on outside in the village. There's some confrontation. The daughter, very much like the Crucible, is one of those girls where it was like, oh, it's burning, and basically made up the story that something was going on with Abita being a witch. She ends up cutting out her tongue, and then she allows the daughter and the mother to leave. And then she goes after Wallace. And when I tell you, the torture she puts this man through is absolutely gruesome, but oh my God, was it satisfying. This man was just the bane of her existence throughout this entire book. I won't go into detail just because it is very gruesome. I did not feel bad for him. Samson is now telling her, you are powerful and you can live for a very long time, but you're not immortal. If they do shoot you or get a hold of you, there's nothing I can do. You will die. She understands this, but her vengeance is such that she just doesn't want to hear it. Ends up getting hurt by other villagers. She is shot a couple of times. This scene was also important, I feel, too, because Samson pulls her away out of line of being shot over to where the minister is. The minister Carter who believed her and was on her side. It was a great moment where you have Samson, who represents the pagan religion, and then you have this minister who represents the Christian religion, and he asks him, please put your hand on her and pray to God, along with Samson while he does his magic. I liked combining of the pagan and the Christian, showing that both have their merits and that there is good in both, bringing Abatha back. But we don't know she is brought back. And that's kind of the end. The village is burning. The last chapter, we jump ahead centuries to 1972. We are following a couple of men as they hike through the forest, and they come upon a cottage. A very old Abatha appears, and that's where the book ends. There were elements of this book that I really liked. A majority of the book, I felt tense because of how angry it made me. I was so angry. Witch trial themed books are hit and miss with me. A lot of these stories do not end well for the witch characters. I was pleasantly surprised that not only did the witch character have friends, have people supporting her, she prevailed at the end as well. And just that entire scene of her just going crazy on the village was so satisfying. I loved it. You know, it's so funny because I wasn't a fan of that scene in the Carrie book. I thought it was a little over the top and not well done. This scene in this book was well written. I thought it was well done. I thought her intentions for like how she was going through the village were structured. It made sense plot-wise what was happening. You felt her frustration, you felt her anger, and you wanted that vengeance for her. That is what made that scene so satisfying. Excellent choice. Excellent read. That was great. The next book recommendation from BookTuber I, and this is actually their #1 recommendation, is The House Switch by Delemhach. My library actually doesn't have this book, so I was a little concerned about how I was going to get a copy of this book, but thankfully it is part of Kindle Unlimited. This is a bit of a thick girly. It is 600 plus pages, so this is going to take me a while. This is probably one of the longest books I've read in a hot minute. That's fine. That's fine. I am looking forward to it. The synopsis for it very much is giving cozy vibes, and what has me intrigued is that this is about not only a male witch, which is not common in my experience as far as witchy stories, but I like that he is essentially like a domestic witch where he works for a family as like a maid or just like a house servant in a way, but he's a witch. From what I'm gathering, it is very cozy, so I'm looking forward to that. I feel like it'll be a nice contrast to Slewfoot. I'm glad that I read the books in this order. Hopefully we'll be ending on a high note. We will have to see. I am about 55% of the way into The House Witch. This has definitely been an interesting last reading experience for this competition. This book is the longest of all of the recommendations. I thought I would be okay reading the Kindle version. I've read the Kindle version for every other book in this. I want to say about 8% into the book, I was feeling like I wasn't getting the tone. It was dampening my reading experience. I felt in myself that it was a me problem and not necessarily the book. I wasn't picking up on the tone that this author was trying to convey. So I decided to get the audiobook. I am so glad I did. I was very correct. The humor is very deadpan. In reading it on Kindle, I just wasn't picking up that nuance. I wasn't picking up that humor. Immediately started enjoying it more, far more. We are following the character of Finley. He has just been brought on as this royal cook for this king and queen who run this little kingdom. Very homely. It's very cozy, like the kingdom itself. This is a testament to the king and queen. Very kind people. The queen is pregnant with her second child after suffering multiple miscarriages. It's a very delicate time for the royal family. Finlay has just been hired on as their cook, and he is keeping a secret. He is a witch, and he doesn't want anybody to know that about him. There is a neighboring kingdom that is very antagonistic, want to attack this kingdom. I'm blanking on the name of the kingdom, but the nice kingdom are aware that this is a possibility that this aggressive kingdom is going to attack. Because of that, and because Finlay immediately when he is hired begins to step on toes, because he is very particular about how he wants to keep his kitchen, who he wants in his kitchen, that's his domain. Part of this is that he just doesn't want people around to figure out his secret, but another part of this is that he takes his job very seriously as a chef. He just doesn't want to be bothered. That sends up some red flags for the kingdom as a whole, particularly the king. He sends his mage. Now, mages in this world are similar to witches. They both have magical powers. The difference is that witches are born with their power, and mages have to do decades of study in order to get to the even minimal level of a witch. And one of these magical abilities is that when they are near a witch, they can detect that they are a witch. The mage, whose name is his name is Mage Lee, determines that Finlay is a witch. The other funny thing, there is bad blood going on between mages and witches, and it is very much documented between the interactions between Mage Lee and Finlay. They are very passive aggressive with each other, and it is hilarious. Mage Lee knows that he is a witch, and the king knows that he is a witch. The story just kind of progresses where it's very slice of life. We are in this world, there are tensions building between the kingdoms, and then even within the kingdom itself, there are moments of tension between certain characters. Not really big plot points, but Finlay is forced to bring on some people to aid him in cooking in the kitchen. One of these aides is Hannah, and she gets harassed by the knights. Finlay steps in to protect her, and in doing so causes these knights to be punished for their behavior, and they now have to work for him. That whole situation is very tense in terms of these men being brutes basically to this tiny woman. What's great about it is that as the story progresses, these characters are now with Finlay. Hannah, the aide, has started to get her own voice. She has become a stronger character, which I love for her. And then the three knights have come to respect Finlay and also have come to understand that their behavior was not appropriate towards Hannah and have apologized for their behavior. What's interesting is that we see interactions between these particular knights and then the other knights in the castle. You can see the difference of them having grown as humans, basically. And I like that. I liked these like little slice of life moments that are allowing the characters to grow in themselves and develop in the story, which was fascinating. I was a little concerned just because of the page length of the book. There was going to be a dip in the plot. Thus far, that has not happened. The pace has been good, and everything that's happening has kept my interest. I hope that that continues. There is another character, Anika. She is a lady. She's titled. She's not royal, but she is part of the royal court, as it were. Even more so, she is the best friend of the queen. Her story is interesting because she was brought in from that like aggressor country to marry one of the lords in this peaceful country. Everyone is so certain that it was an advantageous marriage for her because her husband was far older than her. But what I like about this is that when we get from her perspective and her feelings on the matter, because her husband has passed, she didn't view him as something that like advantageous like everyone assumes. She had a love for him. How deeply that love was is still up for debate because it seems like it was a very platonic love. She describes him as being her best friend. Now that doesn't necessarily mean they weren't in love, like it wasn't romantic, but it's very much clear that there was a deeper understanding to their relationship. And in fact, there is a line in the book where she describes that her only regret in their relationship was that she wasn't able to provide him with a child before he passed. And I thought that was very sweet in a way. As the war is building, the peaceful country needs to make alliances. And in order to do that, the quickest way to do that is to marry people off. They have a royal relative that they could marry off, but she's a little difficult. Their only option is to marry off Anika, who is a widow. She is acting as a double agent in a way. She is acting as a spy for the country. Since she is from that aggressor country and her family is still living there, she has a brother that is relaying information so that they can keep up on what this other country is planning. Even though when they first met each other, her and Finley did not get along. They were very much butting heads. It's very much has become enemies to lovers. Though they never really truly hated each other, they just kind of annoyed each other, which honestly, when it comes to enemies to lovers, I prefer. I don't want you to deeply hate the person and then grow to love them, because that's awkward, that's weird. Now they have started to grow feelings for each other, and that has now become a complication because Anika knows that the king and queen have to marry her off in order to make alliances. Nothing's really happened between her and Finley. They have both kind of confessed that they do have crushes on each other, which I thought was very sweet. Her suitors are now coming to see her, and she gets to pick which one she wants to wed. Two are coming specifically on the request of the king and queen of this peaceful country. Then one is coming from the aggressor country, her eldest brother, who is in charge of their family and is wanting to bring her back to that country because he has a feeling that she is causing issues for this other country, and he's very loyal to his home country. There's been a lot of interactions. There's been festivals. We are just following these people through their day-to-day. The big thing with Finley is that he is trying to keep his magic a secret. There have been encounters where he's had to reveal himself. He basically has endeared himself to the king and queen. The king is still uncertain about him. The queen seems to trust him. The magic system in this book, like many of the other books I've read, deal in the elements. So each witch, their powers are based off of an element. There are also mutant witches that, while their magic is based in a specific element, it has evolved to include other elements, possibly. These witches are looked down upon as less than. Finley is a house witch. He is considered a mutant witch. While he says that his base element is earth, he has got a lot of other stuff going on. He is the product of a very powerful fire witch and another mutant witch. His mother was the mutant witch, his father was the fire witch. And his father was an abusive dick to his mother, to him, and when he came into his power, he was able to kick his father out, because a big thing about Finley's power, the domain that he considers his home, he can protect with his power. And when he is in his home is where his power is the strongest. If you're going to have a domestic witch, I like that there's this very hard rule. I think that is very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Another big thing with Finley is that he has been told all his life that he is not a powerful witch, because he is a house witch, because he is a mutant witch. His powers are very subdued. He has believed this his whole life, but now he has encountered characters that can feel his power. They've all basically told him the same thing. You're stronger than you think you are, because you are radiating power. I would say the main plot line is the war storyline, how Finley is going to play a part in that. It'll be interesting to see how the story progresses. I will say this, the story, the humor in it is a little weird because it very much starts off deadpan, and that was the tonal thing that I wasn't picking up on. But then there's a shift in the story where they start making jokes, they start making jokes. It threw me for a loop. It was like a complete 180. It got raunchy really quick. It was not what I was expecting. I feel like it is going to have a happy-ish ending. It'll be interesting to see where the characters go from here and where they end up. This book, it runs on vibes alone, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're looking for any semblance of an overall plot, you are going to be sorely disappointed. I didn't have a bad time. I'm not going to lie, I was a little disappointed that the main through line didn't have a satisfying conclusion. At least in my opinion, it didn't. There's really no way to go through this book in a linear fashion because there's really not a linear plot. The setting, we have these two kingdoms. There is Daxlaria, and I think it's like Trevork or something like that is the other kingdom. Daxlaria is the peaceful kingdom. Trevork, that kingdom, wants to wage a war against Daxlaria. That is the main through line, is we have these two kingdoms that are about to wage war with each other. In the midst of all this, we have our characters. Finley, he is trying to keep his witchiness a secret. He is horrible at keeping it a secret. What's funny is we get the POV from other characters later on in the story talking about how, oh no, he talks about that's what he does, but he's really bad at it, and we've known he's been a witch for a while. The reason why he wants to keep being a witch a secret is twofold, and I think it's actually brilliantly done and says a lot about the character. One, witches can still be persecuted in this world. Just because we are in a fantasy type, magical type world, that doesn't necessarily mean that witches are welcome. Which is interesting because we also have mages. Each country has their own council of witches, and they are kind of in charge of witch registration, keeping an eye on things, and making sure witches don't get out of control. The other reason, and I think the more interesting reason, is that he doesn't want people asking for help from him for him to use his magic. He doesn't consider himself a powerful witch. He is worried that if it's a life or death situation and someone is asking for his help and it's someone he cares about, that he will not be able to step in and help them. He will feel like he has let them down, that he has betrayed them, that he is not worthy, I guess, of being a witch, or just he's let them down. He's let them down, and he doesn't want to feel that. He doesn't want to be put in that position. I feel like that is a great way to showcase his character. It shows that he has this level of care, that he does care about the people in his life. We have the love interest, Anika. She is a lady. She is also working as a spy because she is Trevorkian. As far as her and Finley's romance, I could have done without that. I do not think it was important to the story. By the halfway point, the book decides that it is the most important plot in the story. I did not think these characters had really good chemistry. There were cute moments with them. There were moments where I went, aw, that's cute. But I wasn't doing that because of the characters. I was doing it just because what was happening was cute. It literally could have been any couple, and I would have probably had the same reaction. I did not like their romance. I felt it stalled the story a lot, which is saying a lot considering this book is over 600 pages. Any type of stall in a book that long is dangerous. I have ADHD. It's hard for me to read books that are over 400 pages. So if you lose the pacing for me at all, that's a risk. I would have preferred having more of the kingdom espionage war shenanigans going on. I feel like we didn't get enough of that. This is a first book of I believe a series. There is a second book. I believe there's actually 2 more books. It could be that this book was just setting up the characters, and the next book we're gonna get a lot more of the war brewings. Kraken, Finley's familiar, he is given this cat when he arrives at the kingdom. The cat's just kind of there. There are instances where he interacts with the cat and the cat's just doing cat things. Cat's good at cat. Then all of a sudden, we get a chapter from the POV of Kraken, and I was not ready. I listened to the audiobook for this. The voice that was chosen for the cat, I was not ready. Compared to all the other character voices that the narrator does, Kraken did not make sense to me. I did a double take. I had to pause for a bit. Anyway, the cat speaks. The cat just talks to other cats. He doesn't talk to other humans. While Finley is dealing with his personal issues, apparently Kraken is working on being his spy, trying to figure out what the Trevorkian forces are doing for the war. Even though the cat part threw me a little bit, it was at least interesting. Through his eyes, we were kind of learning more information about what was happening with the war, which I thought was an interesting way to do it. This was also a nice switch from Slewfoot in terms of, like, both books had cat familiars. I was traumatized by what happened to the familiar in Slewfoot, and I was pleasantly surprised with what happened with the familiar in The House Witch. We have the king and queen, of course. Nothing really more happens than what I've already described, which is that they are just dealing with the fact that the queen is expecting her second child and that the pregnancy has been rough for her. For the king, it's more of him trying to figure out how much he trusts Finley. We get to the point where everyone finds out that he is a witch. Also that his father is the military advisor for the Trevorkian forces, which is a huge deal. Now we're at the point of, what is Finley going to do? Is he going to work as a spy? Is he going to shift his loyalties? I like that Finley is very firm in his decision of, I do not have a father. He does not matter to me. Then we have his kitchen staff, and his kitchen staff includes his aides Hannah and Peter, who are besties. It comes out that Peter is gay. I liked the way that this book handled it because there are multiple gay characters. Peter being, I guess, the main one. It's just kind of stated. We find out that Peter is gay. That's it. That's all that needs to be stated. It's great. I loved it. I loved the character of Peter. I love the character of Hannah. Hannah starts out being this lowly, meek maid in the castle. Finlay brings her into the kitchen. She's able to stand up for herself. She was being abused by these knights. She is now able to stand up for herself. She ends up taking a frying pan to one of the knights and just beating the shit out of him, which is hilarious. I love that it becomes a thing with the knights where she's like, oh, you're going to leave me to my own devices, you're going to let me be by myself, and they're like, girl, you are dangerous, you are fine, we will be here to protect you if you need it, but you've got this. We have the three knights that initially were Hannah's aggressors, but they are being punished by being put under work for Finlay in the kitchen. Not just Finlay, they have to take orders from Hannah as well. I like that there are interactions with these characters that allow them to grow and realize what they did to Hannah was not okay, to the point of that there are other knights that eventually end up doing things to Finlay, to Peter, to Hannah, and these three knights have become so loyal to Finlay and Hannah that they back them up, despite what that could do to them in the ranks of the knights. I love that. And then a fourth knight is added to the group later on. He's still kind of learning by the end of the book. He's still a little not as far along as the three knights that started out initially, but he's getting there. I like this idea of the knights are being trained to be knights and being like these warriors under the captain of the knights or whatever, but then anytime that they step out of line, just being assholes, they get sent to Finlay, and Finlay like straightens them out to just make them decent humans. We also have a little bit from Finlay's mother, who is also a mutant witch. She is a healer, and I guess at some point during a drunken night, which happens a lot of drunken nights happen with these characters, we're gonna get drunk and cause chaos. So his mother comes to help with the queen's pregnancy. The king and queen decide that Anika needs to be married off to basically form an alliance because they know that war is coming. The Dvorkians figure out that that's probably likely a play by Dexlaria. They send in their own suitor when Dexlaria provides two suitors of their own. Of course, this is a problem because her and Finlay have started to grow fond for each other. What's interesting is of the three suitors, one of them is not great, kind of a pompous ass, but the other two are fairly decent. One recently became a lord, so he grew up in poverty, so he's not fully this pretentious person. He actually is like an old friend of Finlay's. He's not a bad guy. The really pompous one is the second Dexlaria choice. The king is kind of hoping that Anika will pick the nicer of the two. Then the Trevorkian guy, considered an outcast in the kingdom, which is such a bizarre choice. If you are assuming this person is potentially a threat to have in the enemy kingdom, I would think that the smart play would be to pick a lord that is very domineering, very controlling, and would make Anika succumb to him. Not that I would want that for her, I'm just saying that would be the smart play. But instead they send what is essentially an outcast of the kingdom, a lord that is made fun of. They don't think highly of him even though he has a title. They're just wanting to marry her off and bring her back. But what's funny is this guy makes it clear, I don't really feel home in my country. So once we're married, we don't have to stay there. We can literally go wherever you want, which is so not what that kingdom wanted from that union. The few interactions we get with the suitors, especially those two, I personally felt the chemistry was better between Anika and them than Anika and Finlay, which is so bizarre considering they are the main romance plot. Once the suitors arrive, the rest of the book is very heavily focused on who is Anika gonna pick? What's gonna happen between her and Finlay, because they have these feelings for each other. We end the book where there is a masquerade ball. Finlay decides, well, that is where I will dress up and I will declare my love for Anika. And he does. What I appreciated about this scene was that it showed the family he has cultivated while working in the castle. Hannah, Peter, the three knights, or the four knights now, his mother being there. These people just band together, they join forces, and they help him because they know that he is in love with Anika. While I don't particularly think that romance is great, what I loved was the relationship between these characters, this love that they had for each other, this friendship friendship, almost found family in a way. They wouldn't have been where they are if not for him. So they want to repay him for that. They get him this great costume to wear to this masquerade ball. He looks like a noble. He's able to tell Anika how he feels. Immediately after that happens, he has to run back to his kitchen. He's worried he's going to get caught. No one knows it's him because it's a masquerade ball. When that happens, Anika immediately, oh, maybe he changed his mind. Girl, he snuck in to a masquerade ball, risking a lot to just tell you that he loved you. And because he had to immediately leave because he snuck into this thing and was trying to keep his presence secret, your immediate thought is that he just immediately changed his mind after telling you he loved you. I didn't like that part. Even the characters seem to think that their love was so flimsy that it could turn on a dime. You shouldn't feel that way if it's someone you truly love. That's wild to me. Then she doesn't click that maybe that is why he had to leave. A bunch of shit going on because her brother is there, and he assumes that Finley is the spy for Daxlaria, even though it is Anika. The end of the book is basically Anika going to find Finley in the kitchen. Her brother finds him there. He still has suspicions that he's the spy, but he doesn't have to worry, I guess, about him having snuck into the masquerade ball. I don't know. It's very fuzzy and unclear. I'm assuming a lot more happens in the second book as far as the war and the government espionage stuff. I should say kingdom espionage stuff. Finley and Anika sharing a kiss and saying that they love each other. I guess the plan is Anika's going to work her strings to try and see about Finn becoming a lord. I didn't realize that you could just do that, but apparently in this world you just gotta pull some strings, or I don't know. There is a path to lordship for a peasant. Is not made clear, not explained, but Anika's like, oh, it's possible. The other thing I want to talk about is the humor. I did think the humor was great. I would say if you are a fan of Shakespeare's comedies, you will enjoy this book. It very much felt like that. A lot of instances where there was comedy happening, it felt like it was meant to be performed on a stage. I don't know, like I actually really enjoyed that. My favorite Shakespeare play, hands down, is Much Ado About Nothing. Love that play. Forever will that be my favorite Shakespeare play. There were just a lot of instances where I felt like I was watching a play similar to that. Initially with the comedic moments, it was refreshing and it was new. It gets to a point where they repeat a lot of comedic elements, and that becomes, I don't want to say boring, but definitely noticeable. While a joke would have gotten a chuckle or even a laugh in the beginning, after 2-3 times of repeating a similar joke, I'm not going to react the same way. I'm just going to be like, oh, okay, yep, got it, and move on. The humor in the book played a huge difference in how I consumed the story, why I switched from reading it on Kindle to audiobook, and I think that made all the difference. I appreciated the character of Finlay more. Initially, I did not like his character, but I grew to love his character. Anika and Finley on their own, I actually really liked. Just together, I didn't like. Do I think that it needed to be 600 plus pages long? Honestly, I don't think it needed to be, or if you were going to keep it at that page length, there needed to be more information about the war, what was going on with that. It was way too much, and it's weird for me to say this, way too much slice of life, way too much knowing about the characters. You could have had the same impact in learning the characters and seeing that character development, removing a lot of that, and then adding in more of the war plot. It is all vibes plus the romance down the line. That's all you're getting from this book. And that's not a bad thing. I truly had a good time with this book. There were certain things that I was hoping more of. I think in order to get it, I would need to read the second or third book. And each of those books are an equal amount of pages to this first book. And I just don't know if I have the strength to read them now. That doesn't necessarily, I'm not going to read them later. I did have a good time. I did enjoy reading this book. The best way to describe it probably was that it was a safe choice. That was The House Witch.
We have officially come to the end of my third vlog for Battle of the BookTubers, and that means that this round of the competition is complete. At least for now. This time around, I started with recommendation number 2, Slewfoot by BROM. I'm giving it 4.25 stars. Slewfoot had moments where I thought I was going to tap into my female rage, justifiably so. It ended up doing a great job of balancing the story where I didn't have to. Every time I wanted to jump to Abatha's defense against other characters, particularly her brother-in-law Wallace, the story allowed Karma to come in and handle it beautifully. Aside from the whole cat scene. That, I think, is going to scar me for a while. Abatha as a character does get to tap into her magic and have her female rage moment, which was dark, gruesome, and just plain fun. There are moments that almost feel like she does get lucky. Her friendship with Samson, her magical powers, and the very few friends that she has in her extremely Puritan village. Those things didn't bother me too much, and in fact subverted a lot of my expectations in a lot of ways. The only thing I wish the book had more of was lore surrounding Samson and the wild folk of the forest. We learn little to nothing about the shaman that traps Samson for a time, only that he is inherently bad. We know that magic exists, that the wild folk have some, and that Samson has some, and that it is derived from a tree in the woods they call Papa, but we don't go any deeper than that. There is no context there. If I could have changed one thing in the book, it would have been that. Moving on to recommendation number 1, The House Witch by Delemhach. This book is getting 4.5 stars. Honestly, this rating only happened because I had the foresight to know I wasn't having a good time reading this book on Kindle. This story is much more fun through audiobook. The tone shines through the dialogue, the character development, and especially the humor. I started out hating the main character of Finn, or Finley. He came off as unlikable and hard to root for. It was the tone set by the reader of the audiobook. Shout out to Matthew Wolfe for his amazing reading of this book that made the character shine for me. This book did have a main plot, but it really wasn't important to the story as a whole. The characters were. I had way more fun just going along with these characters, getting to know them and have fun with them. That is how I felt reading this book. I was disappointed that the main focus towards the end was the romance. I was able to look past it and still enjoy the book as a whole. Thank you for these recommendations, BookTuber I think you did a great job. While these are 2 books I hadn't heard of, I think if I had known of them, I could easily see myself picking them up on my own. I definitely plan to look into other books written by BROM, and I'm really curious to continue the House Witch series. I had a great time reading these 2 books. That being said, I now have to declare who I think BookTuber I is. Since I've named BookTubers G and H as Laura and Beatrice respectfully, that means all who's left is Victoria. I thought about if I wanted to switch any of my previous guesses, but I don't think so. Officially, I am locking it in as this. BookTuber G is Laura, BookTuber H is Beatrice, and BookTuber I is Victoria. I have no idea how close I am to being right, but that is part of the fun. Thank you so much to Laura, Beatrice, and Victoria for your recommendations. I'm sorry if some didn't quite land with me, but I still had a great time, and I hope you can say the same about my recommendations for you. I'm so glad that I got to be a part of this with all of you. Thank you once again to Danny for hosting this and inviting me to participate. It has been a whirlwind of an experience, and I'm so glad that I was able to do it. It will definitely go down as one of my channel highlights of the year. That's all for now. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell so you get notified for my other videos. Also, please make sure to go check out my fellow competitors' videos to see what they thought of their recommendations for this final week. I hope they had as much fun as I did. Until our next chapter together, merry part and blessed be.